Good evening. I have 6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. And our first item on the agenda is the water conservation policies. We went into a stage 2 water emergency based upon our agreements with the City of Wichita to do a stage 2 water emergency when they go to a stage 2 water emergency. That is part of our water conservation plan. That is the appropriate action to take. There was some discussion as to what we should have been doing and what we did, because our water conservation plan does not reflect what we did. So that's a variance that we need to discuss and how we work through that. And we just approved that plan on July 2nd of this year. So it's just a little over a month old. Of course, I know there were only minor updates to it, but I do know that that's what happened. So anyway, I will let our city attorney tell us what she would like to say, and we'll discuss this.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Benaj, Bel Aire Council.
Is your mic on?
It is green.
Yeah. Make sure you're speaking into it. There you go. Yeah, pull it around.
Good evening, Mayor Benaj, Bel Aire Council members, and all the Utility Advisory Council members that are present tonight. This presentation comes from the ongoing discussions and concerns regarding the drought being experienced in our region. It is necessary to discuss Bel Aire's water conservation policies, especially with the City of Wichita having moved to stage 2 of their drought response. Some initial background. Bel Aire has 2 water providers, the Chisholm Creek Utility Authority, which I will refer to as CCUA going forward, and the City of Wichita. The contract with CCUA began in 2002, and the contract with Wichita began in 2007. Some additional background information is that each of those providers have their own conservation plan as well. Bel Aire's Municipal Water Conservation Plan aligns with the CCUA Conservation Plan, but it does not entirely align with Wichita's Conservation Plan. In order for Bel Aire's Conservation Plan to entirely comply with Wichita's Drought Response Plan, there are certain actions that need to be taken, 2 specific actions that we need to revise. The Municipal Water Conservation Plan would need to be revised, and the ordinance would need to be revised as well. One of the questions is legal requirements, whether Bel Aire's Municipal Water Conservation Plan must comply with Wichita's Drought Response Plan. As a wholesale purchaser of water from Wichita, the City of Bel Aire is contractually required to abide by the 2007 Wholesale Water Sales Agreement between the 2 cities. More specifically, Article 5, which references conditions of water service to customers of Bel Aire. Article 5 has multiple bullet points. One of them is Bel Aire agrees that its water conservation plan shall reflect any changes Wichita makes to its program. And Bel Aire agrees to institute for its customers any water restrictions imposed by Wichita on its customers within 48 hours of written notice of promulgations of such restrictions from Wichita. When we continue, there's even a penalty provision. Bel Aire agrees that any violation of the provisions of this Article 5 shall result in a surcharge on rates for water service from Wichita to Bel Aire in the amount of 10%, above the rates as outlined in Article 7, for as long as the violation shall continue. Now I'll move on with the proposed revisions for the Bel Aire Conservation Plan. Right now, as to Stage 2 water warning, it states that restrictions are recommended. One proposed revision would say that restrictions are no longer recommended, but instead replace it with restrictions are mandatory. That is one specific proposed revision. Currently, the conservation plan has an odd, even watering system. That would be removed, and instead, it would be a 4-zone watering system. Now, the city of Wichita does happen to have a 4-quadrant system. That does not mean that Bel Aire is required to have the same thing. But in this specific case, this is one of the things that is recommended. If that system is going to be included, then it's also going to be recommended to update the watering times starting at 8 p.m. and ending by 10 a.m. the next morning. The map would be added as an exhibit to the conservation plan. This specifically shows the 4-zone watering grid, which quadrant is allowed to use water outdoors on which day per week. It includes the times. From what I understand, this 4-zone watering system is easier for Bel Aire staff to manage and maintain. This is another provision in the plan currently. The changes would be made, and they're the ones in red. This gives the city manager an opportunity to use police to assist code enforcement staff. Instead of making city police the primary enforcers, the code enforcement staff would be primary enforcer. I should also share that the code enforcement staff is currently one individual, not multiple, but if he needed assistance, police could assist. Currently, there are no exemptions in Bel Aire's conservation plan. Everyone talks about Wichita's exemptions, and Derby as a wholesale customer has adopted those as well, but Bel Aire doesn't have any. If Bel Aire were to introduce exemptions, there's the possibility for including food producing gardens and businesses that generate their core economic activity. At the very bottom, you can see any others identified by the city manager. So the city manager could look at what is unique for that economic area, the residential area, and make decisions as if there should be any other exemptions. Currently, the conservation plan does not have any trigger to allow for Wichita's 2 stages of stage 3 irrigation bans or stage 4 water emergency. They're kind of combined, and it's very unclear. So this provision would make it clear that if there was a stage 3 irrigation ban from Wichita or a stage 4 water emergency, that those would be included as triggers. Currently, at stage 2 water warning, which is where Bel Aire is at right now, the refilling of swimming pools is not allowed. Derby and Wichita ban the refilling of swimming pools in stage 3 and stage 4. So this is another question that I would ask from council as to what their preferences are. More information about the swimming pools. If this refilling of swimming pools is allowed in this stage, there were some suggestions made that perhaps those property owners could require covers on their pools when not in use to reduce evaporation. Perhaps that should only be done specifically if there's adequate pool filter operation as well. According to our ordinance, it still references city administrator. It was written in 2003. We would update it to city manager. But at the very bottom, you'll see where it states with a water warning, when it exists, that recommended restrictions will occur. Clearly, that's not the same as what Wichita's drought response plan is. That would need to be replaced with imposed mandatory restrictions. Penalty provisions. With Bel Aire's conservation plan, any violation is a municipal offense. That means it is a criminal offense and it may be prosecuted in municipal court. The initial fine is $100. A second or subsequent is $200. Any term of confinement for a conviction shall not exceed 30 days. When in fact, in Derby and Wichita, it is not a criminal offense. Instead, it is administrative fines only. Now, I just went over multiple revisions proposed to the governing body. If the governing body does not want to accept those revisions, then this is the quick fix. It's the language in red. So this specifically states that if any of those triggers for the area-wide conditions identified by the city of Wichita occur, in those instances, Bel Aire is contractually obligated to implement and enforce the drought response measures codified by the city of Wichita. The provisions below are consistent with the more localized triggers of the Chisholm Creek Utility Authority. When the city of Wichita triggers regulatory and enforcement measures under drought response plan, such provisions take precedence over those stated below. The Wichita City Code provisions pertinent to the drought response would be attached to the plan as an exhibit. Just approval of this section alone would bring Bel Aire's conservation plan into compliance, because it's acknowledging when the city of Wichita, when they issue stages regarding their drought response plan, Bel Aire would be following suit. That is an option for the governing body. I've been communicating with multiple individuals, meaning staff, the Utility Advisory Council, and I think that everyone wants options. So those are options for you to consider. The individual revisions, the quick fix, it could be a combination of both. But with this specific presentation, the goal has just been to discuss contractual requirements, acknowledge the need for revisions, and share some proposed revisions. I am glad to stand for questions with members of the Utility Advisory Council here. Perhaps governing body has questions for them. How would you like to proceed?
So I do have one question is why did we decide to deviate from what is already in the conservation plan for restrictions?
So now we're in do we follow our contract or?
I'm not saying there's no violation of contract in our conservation plan. It's in fact, in some regards, it's more strict than Wichita's ordinance.
This not filling swimming pools is an example of a provision that is more restrictive
Right.
than the city, which is drought response plan.
Right. So I'm just curious as to why. I mean, Utility Advisory Committee, and I don't know how much you discussed the drought emergencies in your last go around of reviewing the conservation plan, but I know that the Utility Advisory Committee reviews this every year, and they give, and I know they don't get a lot of citizen input, but they are citizens, and they do give input as to what they think this plant proposal should be. So I'm just wondering what was the driving force that said that plan isn't workable and we need to do something different?
So 48 hours before the city of Wichita went into their stage 2, we received an email saying you must follow suit to comply with your contract. And that's what we did to comply with the contract.
But our stage 2 complies with the contract, doesn't it?
No.
In what way?
In stage 2 of I'm sorry, with the ordinance, this is where all legal authority comes from. According to stage 2, when a water warning exists, restrictions will be recommended. Right now, any code enforcement staff, city manager, city police, the only thing that can be done is restrictions are recommended. There is no mandatory restriction requirement.
Okay, so this is the mandatory requirements, right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
It needs to be in mandatory restriction right now
Okay.
versus voluntary conservation.
Okay.
And to be clear, we have issued no warnings, no fines, no
Okay. That's
no
fine.
enforcement. It's purely communication.
Right.
I think there's something else in there too.
Mhm.
The trigger that's in the Bel Aire Conservation Plan is stage 2 at 60% of the pool. The Wichita stage 2 is 70% of the says that if they do something, we'll do it too. So
Right.
in,
Yeah.
in a way, it's kind of a moot point. We're going to be going through Wichita stuff no matter what.
Well, I agree that we need to implement a stage two. I'm just questioning why we decided to do a different stage two than what was already in our conservation plan. We did something different. The plan currently says that we would have odd, even watering days, and we went with this zone concept. And you're the ones who made the recommendation that we do the odd, even watering days. So I'm wondering, why did we not follow that recommendation and continue with that plan? So I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Sure, and that might have been, frankly, easier to communicate, and probably should have went odd even days. And I think I try to be as transparent as I can about the process, but that we were trying to be a little more have better communications with the residents than the odd even, and be able to identify who gets to water when. So
Just to
administrative.
clarify, Maria, odd even wouldn't have met the 1 day mandatory restriction. If you watered on every even or odd day, that would not have met the restriction from Wichita.
You could cheat the system more easily.
And
And you couldn't enforce, it would be super hard to enforce. Seems like maybe a decision was made that implementation to follow Wichita would follow suit with the quadrant map. Is that kind of what made you make that step?
That was the idea.
Well, and I realize where we are, and like I have said in my emails to both Maria and to Ted, I don't want to be jerking citizens around on this thing. We need to be consistent about what we do. But my suggestion is we come up with a temporary ordinance that suspends the current ordinance and suspends the current water plan and make it effective until November 1st. And then have this utility advisory committee with input from citizens come up with a plan that complies with the current Wichita restrictions and what our citizens input would say. Because my fear is we've done something outside of citizen input, and that's the whole purpose of having utility advisory committee, is to do what citizens are wanting us to do.
I want to back up a bit from where everybody's at right now. Part of the problem here is Wichita changed the rules this year. So there was no way our ordinance was going to be in compliance. They changed it so that the city manager decided when the water restrictions started. This is the first time I've seen that there had a coordinate watering system. It's been odd even before in the past. So we can't write an ordinance that will automatically comply to anything Wichita does because they keep changing the rules. And that's okay for them. They can change their own rules, but we can't constantly keep changing our rules to comply. So unless we just say we're going to adopt whatever Wichita does.
And that's where the difficult part of what your contract says versus, we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth. And I'd like Maria to kind of say, do we need to follow the contract or what we think? That's where I'm confused as well. There's a certain provisions where we need to follow a contract that we are signing as a body. And then there's the other conservation plan that you have to go along with too. So you're kind of in between.
And to the zone thing, if we followed Wichita's plan, we'd be in the northeast zone for all of Bel Aire. I think it's a better thing we do our own 4 quadrants so it eases the level across Bel Aire. But somehow we got to get Wichita involved with this to say that, to bless our plan, that we don't have to totally comply with Wichita, but our plan is good enough that when we go into stage 2, Wichita declares stage 2, we use our stage 2 instead of saying, well, this is going to be our new stage 2 and hope the heck Wichita blesses it.
Well, basically, that's what our contract with Wichita says. We will submit a conservation plan to them and they will approve it. We have done that in the past. And to my knowledge, they've never disapproved it. So it's, as far as I can tell, it's still in effect.
Right.
But I'm hearing, no, it isn't. But I don't see where we really have an obligation to do something different because they've never come back and said our plan was not acceptable. I will admit, I will agree that we should revisit it. It is a bit dated, and we probably need to look at new ideas. So part of that is, the other is that in your comment about them changing the rules, and I agree with you, they can't and shouldn't be changing the rules. And I think Maria would agree with this. They can't be arbitrary in their changing of rules. They can't just say, I just feel like changing the rules today and you got to abide by new rules. They got to have some reasoning behind that in order to make it enforceable, or our plan still stands. And I think that's probably a valid contractual argument. If you're the attorney, you tell us.
Sure. First, I'd like to say that the city of Wichita, their drought response plan, per the information that I have received and reviewed, it's all from 2013. According to City of Wichita staff, it has not been changed. It was adopted in 2013. And their quadrant system, their 4-quadrant system, is referenced in their 2013 drought response plan. I think that is just basically, when they have their workshops and when they have their meetings, they probably talk about different aspects of it, which may give the appearance that something is new. But they do have a plan that was adopted in 2013 and appears to be still relevant in today's planning for them. As far as contractual planning, there are many cities in our same position that are wholesale purchases of water from Wichita. And you will see that their websites and their conservation plans and their educational materials are, if not mirror images, incredibly similar to Wichita. And it is because they are wholesale purchasers of water from Wichita. There is just no legal method that I know of that can override the conditions in the 2007 wholesale water sales agreement to Wichita to go around those conditions. It is so clear about those conditions, them saying what is expected of wholesale customers, that they go even further as to, if they even change their plan, that we have a certain amount of time to comply. And that if we do not comply, that these are going to be the surcharge rates. I think that at this point, not only are we required to follow through, but I think we are required to follow through as quickly as possible.
Maria, I was going to make a comment. So I watched the council meeting. What they did in the meeting was, instead of using the Cheney 12-month average of conservation pool, which it had already went below the 68% or whatever it was at that time, they decided to make it the city manager's, instead of it automatically happening, they decided to give the city manager a chance to review it, double check some things, and he would make the call. That's the meeting I kind of saw on city Wichita's side. I don't know much about their plan. I haven't looked at their quadrants in the past, but that was what I remember seeing. Was they kind of put the brakes on making it an automatic thing and made it more of a, let's review it once it gets to that point, and then we can make a call.
Every wholesale purchaser can create their own conservation plan. They can be more restrictive, just not less restrictive.
Maria, do you see any issue with us just mirroring Wichita? I mean, do you think there will be times where, I mean, this could change based on our ratio of CCUA and Wichita Water, but where we would want to, they haven't enacted anything, but we would like to enact something, or just for simplicity, for communicating with residents and what they're seeing in the news, to just mirror Wichita?
I would use Derby as an example. They are very, if not a mirror image, incredibly close. Perhaps the only differences are in their conservation plan, they go to higher limits of what their city government will do. For example, at this stage, they're going to begin watering less, or maybe they will put certain projects on hold. So if anything, they've gone even a little further than necessary. For us, we can definitely do that. I think with the city manager having the ability to claim additional exemptions because of the unique economic development, the residential, the customer, those things can be taken into account. Another thing that I read, an interesting article is during drought measures, there was a specific type of a youth event that was taking place, and it was during a drought. And for that specific youth event, they wanted to make an exemption for water and keeping that filled up. Now, that did not occur in the state of Kansas. These are other jurisdictions, but it does give an example of how it's helpful for a city manager or administrative staff or council to have the authority to create those exemptions, those temporary.
I'm not a fan of mirroring Wichita's drought response plan that we've not vetted with our own citizens. I don't think that that's a contractual requirement. I think the requirement does have some issues to it, and we do need to abide by those issues. Making stage 2 mandatory is obviously one of those things that you have to do. But I think we need to have one that our citizens give us the buy-in to. And it's not just us dictating to the citizens, this is the way it's going to be without their input. And we meet those requirements of the city of Wichita, but if the citizens say quadrants is the wrong way to go, then we don't do that. If they say odd even is a better way, then we do that. I don't know. I don't have a design on which one's better. I just personally don't care. As long as we get our conservation under control. But I do think that we need to pay attention to that and do something. And that's why I suggested maybe you make this a temporary ordinance, give yourself and the Utility Advisory Committee a chance to review things and get citizen input and then come back with a plan that both meets the contractual obligations and the citizens' input to what we should do.
If we were to pursue this very temporary, quick remedy, the city of Wichita does not, their ordinances do not use a criminal offense. It's administrative fines. I want to make sure that the governing body is aware of that, so that would change for Bel Aire. It would no longer be a criminal offense.
I'm okay with that, but I do think we need to add the mandatory restriction, and we need to add some fines. Otherwise, people are going to ignore it. And I like the quadrant better than odd even. One of the things, though, that bothers me about it is the times. I'm not 100% sure when my time starts. Does it start at 10 o'clock Sunday night and go through 8 o'clock Monday morning? Or do I get 2 windows on Monday? So I'd rather have a smaller window that was well-defined within a day, so I didn't have to debate what that meant.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part. I've been on the phone with a lot of HOAs, and you have 50 zones, you need quite a bit of time to water even once a week. So I think a lot of this is mirroring because the media is out there telling people 10 to 8, and it starts so if you're a Monday quadrant, you start at 10 p.m. on Monday and it goes through Tuesday morning. And I understand we've been trying to field.
Because I haven't set mine up that way.
We've
I
been
didn't
fielding a
understand
lot
that.
of questions about it. But
You told me I could only water on Monday. Now you're telling me I can water all night Monday night. So,
All right.
and as far as the homeowners associations, they need to be scaling back. If they're watering for an hour in a zone before emergency, they need to be at least scaling back to 75% or something.
yeah.
And that will get their watering done faster.
And I've been pleasantly surprised about how many associations that contact our office and able to talk to us at least about it. So I really think the citizens of Bel Aire have, understand the problem and have restricted their usage, at least in the 1 week that we've been under some recommendations.
Good.
And we definitely need to enforce where the water goes. My wife was very upset that Quick Trip today was watering the street quite heavily.
Yeah.
Well, they can call Wichita's hotline.
They're on Wichita's water, but still, it was like there's half the water, it's an exaggeration, but a lot of water was just running down the gutter.
Yeah. I think Mr. Smits has something he would like to say or question. Tom?
Yeah, I didn't have anything. I just, I had an issue with my computer. I was able to get it back up. So it's all good. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
very
sorry
good.
about that.
I think one of the tough things on the time is, right, they suggest you to water late evening or early morning, not in the middle of the day. And that's because of wind and evaporation. So it's kind of hard to get away from the whole weirdness of the time. I certainly was confused myself. It took me seeing it a second time. I think we recommunicated it out to make it a little bit more clear. And so people understood that you start on that day and you might roll into the next day. But I mean, there's a lot of things about how you implement this, how you enforce it. I mean, there's, people have to start seeing this information, and not everybody's going to see it in the same place. Not everybody's on Facebook and getting the information. And so I think that's a challenge. But I think as we communicate it out different ways, I think most people do want to do the right thing and do want to cut back to 1 day a week. And if anybody was paying attention leading up to the mandatory restrictions, you probably were cutting back from 3 days a week to 2 days a week, like I was, trying to get your lawn prepared for it needing to go dormant, because watering 1 day a week, it's going to be really hard to keep your grass green. It is going to go dormant. It is just going to happen. Like, it's only getting enough water to keep it from dying. And then you might still have some problems. So I'm in favor of making sure we're doing what we're needing to do to make sure we're in line with our requirements and we're meeting conservation efforts. But I also agree with Mayor that I think we do need to do something temporary, and we need to let there's a reason why we have our committee, and we need to let them do their work, and we need them to help us make it right. So I agree with you.
Maria, I emailed you about this, but can you talk about the difference between the municipal offense versus the administrative fee, and what that would look like if people get a fee and they're still violating it?
Well, if the governing body proceeds with a quick fix, so to speak, such as the paragraph that would be added and those selected portions of City of Wichita ordinances be utilized, the process would start off with a warning, and then would accelerate to a first, which would be a fine of $100. I have that. And it increases upon the stage. The fines continue to go up. Now, there would be no setting it into a municipal court. There would be no conviction. It would not be a criminal offense. It would be administrative fines only. Some municipalities are adding it to a water bill. If you don't have that ability, that software program, then it would be a letter mailed to the property owner and saying a deadline that you need to have this paid. So I don't know. I can't speak about our software programs, but that would be the process of which a criminal offense is definitely going to be more restrictive, more punitive than what the City of Wichita's 2013 drought response plan is, which of course Bel Aire has every right to do that. But it is also a question if that is how you want to continue going forward.
But it doesn't matter whether it's a civil or a criminal matter. You still have to have a due process. I mean, you can impose the fine up front and then they appeal it, but there has to be a due process.
I've heard of certain municipalities trying to figure that process out.
Mhm.
Is it a property owner who says, I disagree? I wasn't using my water. If so, show me the evidence that you have, and then having some type of an abatement, an administrative hearing, how that would be done, who it would be done by, I don't know, but every municipality would have to decide how to handle that.
Yeah, I think you would need to address that, because you can't just ignore the due process rights.
It's the enforcement process. The ordinances lay out what the penalty provisions are, but it is what exactly is the enforcement process? How are those offenses going to occur? Do they have to be observed by staff? Can it be videotaped and photographed by staff? Is it one neighbor talking about another individual taking a photo or a video? Do you see what I'm saying? There are so many ways for that to happen, and it hasn't been formalized.
Yeah, I don't
Water usage,
think
total water usage.
Absolutely. There are
Yeah.
some municipalities looking at water usage. Some have incredibly sophisticated software that tells them if there's been a jump in water usage, especially on an unpermitted day.
yeah.
But if you
Well,
don't have those tools, you have
yeah.
to look at other
In
options.
Wichita's stage 4, they say that if you haven't decreased your water usage 15% of your average winter usage, then they can fine you or take action. We don't have a stage 4 in our plan, so that's another issue that UAC folks will have to address. We don't have that today, and hopefully we never get there. But we got to be prepared for it if we do. But I do think that, and maybe we don't have to solve this tonight or even in this interim time, but I do think we do need to consider how we're going to handle due process, whether that be an appeal in municipal court. I don't know. I'm not saying what it should be, but we do need to have something there. We can't just say, oh, it's a fine, tough, you got to pay it. You know, it doesn't work that way, and we'll probably get sued if we try it.
The things taken into account as well as staff availability, which department, who specifically, and who's helping. So that absolutely is part of the equation. And I wanted to answer real quick to Councilmember Dean's. I just found that location of the odd and even, and you are absolutely correct. If that had been used, that would have been indirect. That would have been the opposite of what was hoped for with the drought response plan from Wichita. It's only to be 1 day a week, not every other.
As far as communication goes, as you know, we'll be discussing this next Tuesday as well. And then the difficult part is our water bills that go out on the 15th. All the materials needed for that was due on August 1st before this ban even went into play. So we've made staff available that maybe we send out a special letter to residents, especially residents with backflows. That's what we're thinking, because that catches the irrigation residents. And then maybe next utility bill insert, we have a full page on what the steps are. And that's kind of the issue, is we need these types of steps, the warning process, the fine process identified, because I hate just throwing something out there to the residents and not having the steps that they're going to see, either a warning or a fine, and like you said, Mayor, the due process steps and all that. So I think the direct communication's coming. We just need to clear up this part right here.
Yeah, I wasn't saying how that due process needs to be done or that it had to be solved today. I think that maybe you don't need to do that right now. I don't know, but that's really for you to think about. I think to say what do we need to do in the interim. Okay.
We have ideas on enforcement that we'll present.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Schmidt, or is that
Tom?
Mr.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, it's me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Yeah, I would prefer the administrative fee method. I would also like the CCUA authority to, as we look toward the future, I'm hoping the authority can get access to additional water sources. And if that could happen, whether it's additional wells or whatever, we could assist Wichita in cases where there's a drought to utilize more waters from the utility and less from Wichita when they're in a drought situation. So the other thing would be the implementation. If you have a sprinkler system, you can adjust usage and you can drop it quite easily. And that definitely gives you the percentage you want, because it's metered exactly what you want. Once a week on some lawns, because of the soil type, I mean, it's dead grass. and then you have to water it when you try to replace it all. And that just seems like, I'm not sure that's as efficient. So it'd be good if we had some leeway to meet Wichita's requirements and maybe exceed them if we have capability, which would be something the authority CCUA could possibly assist with. But that's what I'd like to see, is what are we looking for the future? If Bel Aire keeps growing, Wichita keeps growing, is there a plan to how do we get additional sources to mitigate these situations? So that's all I had. Thank you.
Well, that's very good information, and thank you for your comments, because we're going to have a discussion in the morning about water and water sources. So I don't know that we'll solve it tomorrow, but we'll at least have some discussion about it. So it's your comments are timely.
Maria, just to point something out. So there has been a lot of stuff shared in the media about sort of the goal of the conservation, and the number you see is to cut usage by 10%. But contractually and by the restrictions, it's telling you what to do. It's saying you only can water 1 day a week. So those are kind of in conflict, because there's one that's telling you what you have to do, and there's one that's like the goal. So contractually, what are we required to do? Water one time a day or 1 time a week.
And
That's
that,
like where it kind of becomes an issue with if you're tracking it, if you can even meter it, which one do we have to follow? The goal or the prescribed?
so I'm looking at the City of Wichita's drought response plan from 2013, and within it, there are percentages that need to be met. So I'm going to agree with Ted that any communications that go out, we're going to have to double check and make sure that not only are we complying with cities, but if we're going to be different, it's going to be because we're being more restrictive versus less. So I appreciate that, Councilmember Dean. That's true, because there's mixed messaging and we have to be consistent on that.
Mr. Terry?
The municipal water plant also has the percentages.
I hate to do this to you guys, but when you speak out there without a microphone, people outside of this room cannot hear you. So if you could please come to a microphone and speak. It just helps with the
Sure.
communication.
And I'll go ahead and mention what he said. He was also bringing up not just Wichita's conservation plan, but the conservation plan from CCUA, that they have information within it, and we need to make sure that we comply with that as well. And I'd like to say thank you to Terry and the entire Utility Advisory Committee. They have been answering all my questions, responding to emails, offering information, asking for help, and they have responded very quickly. So I appreciate that.
Great. Okay, so is that the consensus? I mean, we can't make a decision tonight. They're going to come back with a proposed interim ordinance that we're going to approve maybe next week, and we'll go for there. And then Utility Advisory Committee needs to go and come up with a more solid plan that is compliant with, that they feel is compliant with Wichita, plus using citizen input. And I do encourage citizens to please show up to the Utility Advisory Committee meetings. I think you're still meeting tomorrow at 3:00. So any citizens that would be interested in coming to that meeting, those are open meetings and they are here at the City Hall.
Here's your plug.
It is, and I'm
There
at
you
the
go.
microphone, so.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
we are meeting tomorrow at our normal 3:30.
3:30 or 3:00?
3:00, excuse me, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of what is being asked of us.
Sure.
So we definitely do need to have citizen input into our plan. And there's already some revision as to what we're going to say, and we have a framework for that. But we definitely want to hit on pools, on the odd even versus the 1 day restriction, the quadrant versus the citywide, how we would do that. We could address the what do you call it? The accountability or what should it be? Should it be a criminal offense versus that kind of thing? We could address
Civil
that. I
penalty.
don't know if the citizens are going to really want to get into that, but we'll.
I think we got to do something.
Yeah. So I do want to ask this: the way the plan is written right now, it's as Maria noted, it's CCUA's plan, but we defer to Wichita being their plan would also be used. So the Bel Aire Municipal Water Drop Plan is essentially CCUA. We're going to maybe attempt to have both plans referenced in here. It's going to be very difficult to do that. And I am wondering if Derby and other cities who we're using as example, do they have two sources of water like we do and two contractual? So we are special is what you're saying. We've got a real job then trying to combine two sets of criteria into one plan. We will do our best. But as our discussions with Maria, we're going to want to be able to say, okay, here's Wichita's thing. If we decide not to go with them in the future, we want to be able to use CCUA's basic framework also. We will do our best to try and make that work. But
So a couple things is what plan you come into with today is not set in stone.
Yeah.
10 years from now or 5 years from now, or maybe even next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it could be that things will change and we need to revise that plan at that time. So don't feel like you're tied to something that has to last for 30 years. The other is, I think if you read through your current plan, it really does already incorporate the CCUA needs because
Yeah.
at stage 2, it says 60% of capacity and 1.8 million gallons per day. And then it provides purchase water issue stage 2 from some other source, which in this case is Wichita is saying we need to do, they've announced a stage 2. So that says, because they've announced a stage 2, we got to implement a stage 2. So I'm all on board that we have to do that. Okay. If anybody got the idea, I thought we didn't have to do that. I'm sorry, they misunderstood me, but we do have to do that. But what is the definition of a stage 2? I don't think we have to follow every single rule Wichita follows. I mean, what constitutes a stage 2? Okay, they make that decision. What constitutes stage 2 to them? But as long as we're able to meet, as Mr. Dean alluded to, the 10% goal, I think we're going to be in good shape. But there are some things in there about being mandatory versus optional. I think this probably needs to be there. I mean, I think you'd have a hard time trying to make an argument that we can do it optional when they're doing it mandatory. But that's those kind of things that we want you to think through and say, what do you think is the right thing that we should do? Here's and lay it out. Here's Wichita's plan. Here's what we currently have. And how do we mesh these together? And maybe we do some thinking outside the box. Okay. I don't know. The other thing is earlier in the year, I did a little analysis based upon some data I got from staff, Ted and some others, about when are our maximum water use days, when are our minimum water use days. And I'm not criticizing this, but this plan that we have right now has us using watering on the 4 highest water usage days, not the 4 least water usage days. That just seems inconsistent to me. There may be a very good reason for that. I don't know. I'm don't have any input to that, but it just seemed odd that we went with that plan.
Okay,
So.
well, we could look at that too. I also wanted to mention we could start looking at the triggers too. I mean, right now it's an unbalanced trigger thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Wichita's triggers first. We triggers the CCUA plan, which we have 2 triggers second. What happens when you enter a Wichita stage 2 versus a Bel Aire stage 2? These are probably things that we're all going to try and flesh out here to make it less confusing. So. So we will do that. What is the time frame that you want us to kind of get this?
Well, my suggestion is that we make this ordinance temporary until November 1.
Okay.
So we would need something in place November 1 or so. I mean, and if we think that we need more time than that, I think it's okay to go later into the winter. We got to have something in place definitely before next year.
I heard something about next week, and I thought, whoa, hold on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Right.
If somebody,
No,
I don't think I said that.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So Maria, you want to address that, or as far as the red part provision? I mean,
So the red part, the red language, that fail-safe provision, that is what can be proposed on August 20th. It will have an exhibit with it. We'll have ordinances that follow along. So that way it's very clear. That could be approved as presented. It could be approved as amended, but that sounds as though a way that could work for all parties. And then in the meantime, after that, I could work with the Utility Advisory Council on making sure to provide a more thorough, detailed, custom product for Bel Aire participants that incorporates CCUA and the City of Wichita.
Yeah.
Also, the Bel Aire Conservation Plan, it does say that it gets revised every March with a potential stage 3 or stage 4. We probably should start working this on a little more often.
Yeah, we don't have a stage 4 in the plan, and I agree. We need to put one in. So, being as Wichita has one, we need to have one that defines what does it mean for us.
You should probably have it ready before next spring, so that
Right.
if we need to enact
It
it.
will be.
Maria, so that what you're saying is if we use that red provision and we put a date on it, can we make it expire like Mayor is suggesting on the ordinance, have it expire as a temporary clause
with the motion approving it until the Bel Aire Conservation Plan has been amended. Do you see what I'm saying? Something along those
Right,
lines.
yeah.
But I really do need to meet with Utility Advisory Council to come up with a realistic timeline as to when that can
Sure.
be
Yeah.
completed. And I'm going to their meeting tomorrow and can provide that update at Tuesday's meeting.
Okay, that'd be
And then
great.
Ted, I had a quick question for you. So you said you need to put all this information out to citizens. Do you believe that if we were to take action, put in the temporary ordinance, that you would be able to do that? You'd feel comfortable doing that?
I mean, and that's where we go into that. If you take that red portion as Wichita's
Right.
drought response plan
Right.
stage 2,
We're
then
just following
that's
what they're-
pretty much what we'll follow until the UAC can give us the revised, updated
Right.
one.
the
And then the other step is the city of Wichita needs to approve our conservation or accept our conservation plan, our updated one, and then we can use it. Because the problem also is, inside the contract is it needs to be accepted by the city of Wichita, and we can't, we're trying to find when the last time that happened. And that's what gets difficult with anything we have that, and we have a good relationship with Wichita, and Maria has done great work with them, just understanding each other. And I want to keep that into the future as a growing city in this area. We have to, be good neighbors as well as regional partners in this drought conservation effort. And I think we have, John sitting back there. I think we've done really good in the last 5 days. Usually we're around 1.7 to 2 million gallons per day. The whole city has. The last 4 days we've been around 1 million gallons total. So we really did a good job.
That's really
And
good.
we're also working on taking less Wichita water and more CCUA, as you know. So I think once these numbers start to float out, I think we can prove that we're being
We're going to
good.
be exceeding the 10%.
We're being good neighbors, and we're going to do the right thing. It's just a matter of we want to signal to Wichita that we are complying with everything that our contractors
Yeah,
are.
reduction
difference
is
between
total usage. It's not just what the Wichita take.
Yeah, so the Wichita take is we're trying to take as little as we can from Wichita. So
But
we're usually we take around 700 million gallons from Wichita a day. We went that way back about half. What, John? You got the numbers, or sorry, John's
got 'em there.
John's the man of water.
Okay.
I'm tall. One of my duties in my job is to keep track of how much water we use from both CCUA and Wichita on a daily basis. With the current system, even though we're not enforcing it yet, we have seen a decrease in Wichita usage, and we've actually been able to keep up with just CCUA supplying water to us. Normally, we can't do that.
That's great.
Right.
So
Okay.
Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, we've had no water from Wichita.
None.
No.
Okay.
It's all been CCUA supplied.
Good.
And then Friday and Saturday, we also saw a decrease in usage, 200,000 from Wichita and then 42,000. So
Okay. So you're doing great. And
Yeah.
that's good
Yeah.
news. Okay.
Should have
Thank you.
probably led with that, but we wanted to.
So Ted,
Hey, John, will you stay up here?
what I'm hearing is, there's a contractual thing here, right? But there's an intent. The intent is to reduce usage, and this is clear data that's showing not only are we reducing it to Wichita, we're probably reducing it to CCUA as well. We're just not demanding as much water, which is not shocking because a lot of water is used to irrigate. So when you cut down to 1 day a week, even if some people are only doing it 2 days a week, even though that's not what we're asking them to do, it's a lot less than most usage when they're watering every day, or sometimes people are watering multiple times a day. So it's great. It's good to hear that. I'm glad you brought that data.
John, we talk a little bit about, and I like to always point out the employees that do a lot for Bel Aire. And John's our main water operator. He controls the tower levels. He does everything in that. So I want the citizens to know that. But talk about maybe the difference between a quadrant-based watering system versus odd even. How does that help you manage our water, or what are you seeing on that?
well, for that base, the quadrant, we definitely see less usage in the towers. We can maintain those towers from CCUA better when there's not as much draw on demand. On a odd even, since we wouldn't be able to enforce a single day, we would see just as equal amount of demand, I think. It would be halved because it'd only be half of the city as opposed to the whole city, but we'd still see that draw, which would then require us to pull from Wichita more to keep our towers at a high enough height to maintain pressure.
Okay. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Ted, just for the citizens that are listening, so if we were to use that temporary to match Wichita, we would be matching the same warning system, the same initial fine, the follow-up, like verbatim what people are seeing in the media
So-
of the 100, 200, that would be what we would be in advertising.
The fine levels would be the same. The enforcement's got to be different. We don't have the staff. We
Right.
don't have the
Sure.
software system. Just for a preview, I mean, I have Tom, my code enforcement officer. The way I see this going is Tom has a camera complaint, or he just driving around, see someone, he's going to document it, start a case, and issue a warning. A lot of what that's about the only way I know how to do it. If we wanted to try to do it off our water bill, as you know, we're going through a new ERP system at this moment. Hopefully in the future we'll have better capabilities, but a lot with our radio reads is a little outdated as well. So as our system matures, we'll be able to do some of the things you're seeing from Derby, but really a lot of what we have is John's raw draw from the water towers, and are my one staff member that can enforce. So, and that's where a lot of education and promotion would go a long way.
I mean, the big thing I hear there is, and the city manager's going to have discretion based on the way the Wichita one's written, is in a situation where we're cutting usage by 25, 30%, there's maybe some more appetite for an exception here or there if it makes sense. Whereas if we're not getting to the goal of over 10%, there's maybe less appetite for being able to make exceptions. I mean, that's going to fall on your shoulders if we adopt that. So I just want that to be out there. So thank you.
I just had two quick things. I brought this up with Maria, and I know this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but we have a rate study coming up for water at some point, right?
Yeah, hopefully phase 3 of our master plan. Yep.
So I don't know if there's a framework or not for like peak pricing, essentially because we are a smaller city and our enforcement issue, kind of building in pricing where there's almost a fine there. The violation in your bill is so cost prohibitive that you'll do a lot of your own self-policing to avoid that. I don't know if that's a possibility at some point. I know we have the tiers, but in terms of like, if you're in a drought stage and you go into this tier, jacking the price way up.
Yeah, the tier structure would be the best case. That's what we currently have is a multi-tier as far as having a smart system enough to know when a trigger happens. That'll be something we'll talk about the experts, because as you know, the Californias of the world have been dealing with this issue for a long time, and they probably have certain triggers that and examples that we'll bring to the council to consider. But
And then last thing for Maria is you talked about the 10% fee from Wichita. They're not applying that now because we are acting in good faith to get in compliance by next week, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They are aware of where we're at, and they are aware that we are trying to do the best we can, and we're trying to move as quickly as possible.
Well, from the numbers I'm hearing, everybody would have a hard time trying to make a case that we were not
It's incredible.
good partners in this.
We are being a good partner. We're trying.
All right. Is there any more to discuss on water conservation policies? I mean, we're not going to fix this tonight, but all right. Well, I appreciate the Utility Advisory Committee members for showing up for this discussion, and we look forward to hearing some good information from you in the next few months. But I know you're not going to solve it tomorrow either. So, but you kind of know what situation we're in. So that's good. Okay, good. Thank you. Next thing on the agenda is the 2025 budget. I thought we already talked about this, but I guess we're going to talk about it again. And I hope it's not like the city of Wichita. I understand their meeting went for like 10 hours today or so. I don't know how long.
Oh,
it
I
went.
hope not.
I don't know when they got done. I know
I
they
hope
couldn't show
not.
up to CCUA or WAMPO meeting because they were still tied up in their city council meeting at
They're
3
arguing-
o'clock.
They're arguing about paid parking downtown.
Oh,
So they're
okay.
arguing about all day.
Okay,
Apparently, they're getting a lot of citizen feedback at this point.
good.
I trust that Barry's not going to make it take 10 hours.
Yeah,
He's not
just
Yeah,
take-
proposing.
Are we going to
He's not
put
Take 10
parking
hours.
meters
I'll
in?
just do it right now.
Just walk out.
You know,
No,
putting
that-
parking meters out? Good. Don't.
So, well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight is our third budget workshop for fiscal year 25.
Can we wait just a minute till they can clear
Yeah, they're still making a lot of noise there.
I'm out of the hallway there.
shut the door or something?
Okay. I think.
I think we're good now. So like I said, tonight's the third workshop for our fiscal year 25 budget. This is pretty much the final draft of the budget. The goal this evening is to get any feedback, recommendations, any final adjustments. And then August 20th, we'll bring the hearing notice to you guys for approval to get published and then hold our hearings on September 3rd. So that's where we're at this evening. So just some quick overview, highlights and goals. We did adjust the mill levy down to 42.5 from 43, which was proposed at our last workshop. So there's a half mil reduction of just over $56,000 for the 25 budget. Overall, since 21, we've reduced 3.230 mills in that time period, which if we had those in the fiscal year 25 budget, that equate to over $360,000 that we have cut over 4 budget cycles. What's still included is the $950,000 for the streets improvement plan. It's also included is the employee retention aspect of it, the 2.5% merit increases along with the performance bonus and a 3% COLA across all employees. We have added 1 police officer, which we did reduce that by 1 from what was proposed. 2 were proposed. We are now recommending 1 FTE for the police department. Included $150,000 of that $400,000 transfer to CIP from the general fund to be dedicated to parks, refreshing, revamping those. And so that leaves us an extra $250,000 in CIP funds moving forward. So we're still maintaining our reserves at right around 30%, which is what all the credit rating agencies want to see for cities our size, especially. Also, we'll talk about the CIP a little bit later in our equipment improvement plan for the next several years. So since our last workshop, there's been a few adjustments based on recommendations and feedback from council. Lowered the mill rate by half a mil. The 1 FTE for police. Also, so that affected their uniform budget. That was reduced slightly. We did move that engineering cost for Woodlawn from the mayor and council portion over to admin for the engineering services. For the rec department, the proposed ATV and their HVAC replacement, we just switched that to equipment reserve. So that reduced an extra $20,000 from the general fund in the tax budget. The water and sewer transfers, I made that a little easier, a little clearer to understand moving forward. So I'll highlight that when we get to those funds. And then the fund balances, they've all been updated with the audited financials since that was adopted last meeting. So put this together on the surrounding communities all around us in the Sedgwick County area and also Andover. Did some research and found all their proposed mill rates for 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 others are reducing theirs for 2025 along with us. The greatest was Hayesville at 3.5%, and then we're reducing a half mil, which is about 1.16% of our total levy. So we're right there in the middle. So I also put together some data based upon where you live in Bel Aire. If you're on the USD 259 side, this is going to be your total tax levy with all those jurisdictions in it. I tried to find USC 375's budget at a glance, but I think they're having their meeting next week to identify.
Well, I
all
got the
those
revenue
numbers.
neutral rate letter today and I have that in there. So, no, I don't have theirs. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
mistaken. I got a different school district I got to deal with. That's another property. So
Gotcha.
never mind.
Yeah, one thing I noticed on those revenue neutral rate notices is there's no mill levy numbers on them now. They're just dollar amounts.
Mhm.
So you can't see how much the reduction
Yeah,
is. You'd have to calculate it all out to figure out what the $1.25 reduction would be, based on their evaluation.
I've told the
analysis. So,
legislature several times it's a useless report. And they shouldn't be requiring it, but they're still requiring it.
I mean, I've done this for a few years and I was confused looking at it myself. Yeah. So I did find the Wichita School District, the county obviously has theirs, Fire District 1. So if you're on the USD 259 side of Bel Aire, your overall tax levy, including our reduction of half a mil, is going to go down 2.312 mils for fiscal year 25 if everything is adopted as proposed with all taxing jurisdictions. So our total levy is going down just over 2.3 mils. So the chart in the bottom there, based on the valuation of your house, the reduction in your tax bill is there labeled on the right. So if you're anywhere from $100,000 house to $500,000 house, you're going to save anywhere from $26 up to $130.
Is that
for the
real
year.
dollars? Because, we paid we paid taxes based upon last year's numbers, and then there were increased in valuations. So
Yeah.
that's
So
going to change.
The 25 number there is the 24 tax year. The 24 numbers, the 23 tax year.
So, but if your valuation went from 200,000 to 250,000, that's not reflected in that, right?
Yeah, the valuation would have happened in January 1 of this year. And
Right.
in December of this year, you're paying those taxes.
Yeah.
So it's based on that valuation
Okay.
number. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear that in total dollars, if valuation didn't change, would reflect your reduction in taxes. But because valuations went up, you probably won't see a reduction in taxes. You just see a tempering of the growth in tax.
Right.
Depends on how your valuation went up.
Yeah, it depends on your
Everybody's going to have a
valuation.
different situation, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the citizens don't say, well, you said you're going to have a reduction in dollars and we don't have a reduction in dollars. And I truly don't believe very many citizens will see a reduction in tax dollars.
So yeah, if your valuation stayed the same
Right.
from last year to this year, this is the reduction you'd see.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think last workshop we showed, and again, everybody's different in different areas, but they did tamper a little bit more this year. I felt overall city looking at different houses that it wasn't quite the 10% that we've been seeing in previous years, but
Mine
It
was.
It was a mixed bag.
What-
Yeah, some went down, ours stayed the same, but
Yours stayed, yeah.
driving around GIS, others went up. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we had that average 9.8% increase range. And then after you back out all the new construction, everything is around 6 was the average. 5 to 6% was
Right.
the average increase.
Was that quite a bit lower than the previous year on the
The
average?
previous year was 19.8% overall.
Yeah, it went up a bunch these
17,
previous years.
16.
So it was it
Yeah.
tempered the growth
Yeah.
on valuations on the average.
The average increase. Yeah.
Still
Thought
too
that
much,
was
but it was
interesting.
tempered.
There we go. So we'll move on to the budget review here. General fund revenues total, the fiscal year 25B budget, that's what we're looking at. That's what includes that $500,000 reduction. That is now the proposed budget for fiscal year 25. So you can see there in the property tax revenues, that's reduced by that $56,000 there. That's the main difference on the revenue side from what was presented at the last meeting. So an overall increase of revenue about 3.5% for the general fund. So now we'll go department by department here and just kind of go through this real quick. The administration department, the only changes from the last meeting was we moved those engineering costs from mayor and council department over to admin. So that's what that 120,000 increase was compared to what was presented at our last meeting. And at this meeting, compared to the last one, I also included the fiscal year 24 estimate where we think we're going to be at the end of this year, as well as those percentage breakdowns on the right side there to get you a better.
Explain those percentage breakdowns because I could make heads or tails of them.
So that's the change from the proposed budget, the fiscal year 25B budget, compared to the 24 budget. That's either the percent increase or percent decrease.
So the second
Between the
column
two.
and then the final column.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So how does you going from 808,000 to 839,000, and that's a reduction of 6%? How does that
So
work?
it's that fiscal year 24 budget column, the one just to the left of that.
The budget column.
Yeah.
Okay,
budget.
the budget column was 890,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
which was
All
originally
right. I see
budgeted.
that as being a reduction. Okay. That was from the budget. All right. Very good. This reduction from budget to budget, not
Yep.
estimates to budget. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's really the only change there. We can either take feedback recommendations as we go along or just kind of go through it and then look at everything as a whole. Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, just keep going. They'll stop you. They're not
Okay,
afraid to
yeah.
stop you.
I didn't have any questions on that page.
Yeah, and Councilmember Schmitz and David, I can't see you guys, so if you have a comment, just pipe in. That's fine. Planning and zoning, no changes there from what was proposed at the last meeting. Everything stayed the same. Municipal court, no changes. Everything stayed the same there. Parks and grounds, no changes. Everything stayed the same there.
And by
Just-
when you say no changes, you mean no changes from the last proposal?
Yep,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just want
From
to make
what
sure
was-
we're on
from
the
our
same
last
page what we're talking
workshop.
about.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I do want to highlight here on this one, the public parks improvements there, that $70,000, half of that is for that safety surfacing. I think it was Denise Park, was it?
Brookhauser Park.
Brookhauser Park, yeah.
And that's
You're
to
doing
take, that's
that
to
there.
take out the like pea gravel, put in this to make it more
Yeah.
accessible.
Yeah, and I think if you recall, they have those KDH or waste tire grants that we're going to apply for that, and that is that their grants kind of a little off cycle from the maybe not off cycle from the budget, but it starts in November and it's awarded in January. So we won't know for sure if we get it, but we're going to put in for it.
So we're not doing this project if we don't get it, right?
Well, then we'll reevaluate what we want. So
Okay.
that's kind of where
Are we getting any concerns with that park as far as the pea gravel that we use currently?
every Marty's here. Every gravel park, I think, gets
Okay.
some complaints.
All right.
Well, I know the guys have to go out and treat it every now and then as well, clean it out.
The cats like it. So. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, Eagle Lake's the other one that we're doing
Okay.
here pretty soon.
Eagle Lake's this year, but there's been a lot going on this summer, so it'll probably be a fall project.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Just before you move on, can you quickly give a rundown? We talked about Eagle Lake, but what was decided on?
Yeah, so we just workshopped Eagle Lake, and we were mainly talking about the volleyball court that was there and relocating that. I know there was Marty might have got a bid or to put some footings in to move the volleyball court. I think we're going to start with the playground area and then have the plans ready for the volleyball court and see what the community. Again, if we take out the volleyball court and no one says anything, then we can reassess what we want to do. If
They'll
put
say
it back
something.
in.
You
And that's
can't
what
take
we're
it
kinda-
out.
That's what we're kind of
well
looking for.
used.
We have the plans to move the volleyball court, but we're going to tackle the playground first, and then move the volleyball court.
I think you might be wiser to go the other route because that sand is everywhere over there. It is.
Yeah.
It is on the walks. It's everywhere.
But we'll see the bids in the fall, probably. for
Correct.
the-
Yeah. We haven't bid it out yet, so you'll see and have input on that as well.
Okay. I would be in favor of flipping that plan, doing that volleyball court first, and then get the sand out of there completely. But that's my view. All right, go on. Thank you.
Catch myself up here. So next is the police department. We did remove that one FTE and then has some minor reductions throughout the remainder of the budget, the uniform section there. So we did reduce the overall salaries there, the FICA and KP&F expenses because we took out that one employee. So those are the changes that we made from the last workshop for the police department.
So the first question I had on this one is the difference between 1 and 2 goes from 188,000 addition to our previous budget, and the 1 is 133, so about 55,000 is what you're accounting for the difference in the salary.
Mhm.
Is there anywhere in the budget we've saved because of were we expecting an additional vehicle? Is there any savings realized from not adding an additional vehicle, or were we planning to overlap? Were we going to purchase?
No, we don't need to purchase another additional vehicle.
Right.
We'll just continue with our one vehicle per year replacement plan
Gotcha.
in the equipment plan.
And then the other question I had was the savings from overtime. Are we expecting to realize any savings if we add the one FTE versus two on overtime expense from the previous year?
I mean, I believe it had some effect on it, but I don't exactly know how much based upon what trainings are going to be scheduled, when people are taking time off, things like that. Once we get that FTE in here, we'll have to revamp that schedule a little bit, try and
So it doesn't sound like you've counted
iron
on
that
it.
out.
Sounds like it's probably budgeted for overtime.
Yeah, and I think the big push for two for me was just the coverage amount. So if you do have a training on a third shift, you don't have just one officer on the third. And we talked to Chief a lot about it, and we're okay taking incremental steps going forward. Chief does a great job of managing overtime, a lot of those aspects. So it's not nearly as easy as saying if we add one officer, we're going to reduce overtime by $70,000. It's more of an operational type maneuver that we want to get to eventually with each successive budget cycle. And that goes with growth. I mean, we're building a lot of houses, adding a lot of citizens, and we'll continue to bring back ideas of creating a more a better, a more effective force, all those types of adjectives you want to throw at it.
Yeah, Barry, that was just like I had asked you. I think the number was like 30,000 that we'd spent on overtime the previous year.
35,000, yeah.
So it wasn't a big number.
Yeah, it's not enough to
Even
pay
if-
for another FTE, but yeah.
Even if we could cut it a little, it would help. But it's not a huge number. I was just kind of throwing that out for the citizens to understand that's something we're considering.
Well, it is an important metric to do monitoring. What is your FTE equivalent in overtime? Because sometimes it justifies an additional officer and actually reduces your cost.
Right.
Okay, not always, because there are a lot of factors in there.
Yeah.
So it's not just a straight number across, but it is something to watch.
And Barry, just while we're on this, the new ERP system will better track a lot of that data for us, I believe, or is it pretty similar to what we're doing right now with spreadsheets?
Yeah, we'll have a much easier way of reporting on all these items,
Your average man hours and all
rather
that
than
kind of data. Yeah.
exporting raw reports and converting them and doing all these things. It even has its own module called position budgeting, to where we can select a position we have, insert it into next year's budget, and it'll show us everything it's going to affect.
It'll reflect it.
instantly. Yeah.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So we can sit here and move things here in and out and add a position, take a position out, half FTE, whatever we want to do. Instantly spit out a report for how that's going to affect our budget.
Good.
Which would be really nice.
Ted and Barry, both, when I've asked questions, you fired that information back to me. So I appreciate it. It's helpful, even though it might've been harder for you to come up with.
It takes a second, but we'll get there.
So
the
Barry,
more I answer those questions, the more spreadsheets I have building up, so I can pick out real quick to make it faster. But yeah, we're good there.
so
No,
Barry,
yes.
yeah, I've just got a question. In general, if we do this half-point mill levy drop, is our revenue going to offset the increases that we have in expenses this year? Or are we just going to reduce reserves in order to give the half-point mill levy drop? I just want to know, are we really, saving the money and therefore we can give some back? Or are we just going to take the money from somewhere else?
Yep. So we still have enough to cover all of our operating expenses. So that overall reduction of the general fund, which is about 353,000, we have more dollars allocated for like one-time uses, like the $70,000 for Brookhauser, the 100,000 equipment transfer, the CIP transfer. We have dollars built in for those one-time expenses that if we were to cut those, we would not be affected operationally, even with that $500,000 drop.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anytime we spend down that fund balance, use those reserves, it's always going to be for a one-time purchase. It's never going to be for an ongoing reoccurring expense. So that's how we monitor that and keep that in check.
Let me put it in a different way. So there was growth in our budget. There was growth from valuation. There was growth from new construction. What we're doing by cutting a $500,000 is not capturing all of the growth in the revenue stream. We're not discounting I think that was a good question that Tom asked. We're just not capturing as much of the growth that was generated.
Exactly.
And there is another, just to make sure everybody's clear about it, the 30% target in reserves. That's not a hard and fast number. You can go down a couple percent, you can go up a couple percent. And as your year goes on, you may find that it is actually end up with, I think this year we're looking at 37% if I saw the number right. So it's perfectly appropriate to go and expend that money in the next budget year because it's already money you've taxed. Okay. And we don't want to be holding excess reserves, but we want to have adequate reserves. And so because you start holding excess reserves, we're taxing people too much. Okay. So we need to make sure we're not doing that. But we don't go spend the money just to spend the money either.
Right, we're providing the services.
We
that
see a lot
meet-
of that in the
to meet
federal
that
side.
collection, right.
And really that save and spend method we've been practicing for not save, but you know, this type of method for the last 8 years.
Yes.
I can 100% guarantee you it's all been going to street rehabilitation. That
It
is
was needed.
that is
That's the
100%
whole-
where any kind of lowering of our fund balance, you can point straight to the street rehabilitation program we've been doing.
Great
Okay,
question.
thank you very much.
One thing I wanted to make this comment. I did look at the 23, 24, and the proposed 25 and the difference. So we're showing a 9% increase from 24 to the proposed 25 budget. If you go back those 3 years, the revenue has increased 31%. So that if you take that over 3 budget cycles, that's an average of 10% increase per year, year over year. So that is something that will occur when you have growth. Bel Aire has been growing. So I think that's a good and a bad thing, right? With growth, some of it is new construction, some of it's valuation, but I am sensitive to that. Like that doesn't seem very sustainable. Like when I look at that year over year, I would expect that as we continue to grow, we can continue to cut the mill and not cut it just a half. If we're growing, like we should really be able to cut that pretty consistent, seeing 5 to 10% growth year over year. Do you feel comfortable with that? Like our strategy has been that for several years now. Let's continue to cut the mill. Do you see that as a consistent path forward?
As long as it doesn't fluctuate a larger amounts at a time, right? If it's a consistent decrease over time, yes.
And not just a sharp. Right?
Not just, yeah, let's just drop 10 this year just because, like, no, that's sustainable. We can look at Mulvaney, we can look at other cities around us. You'll see their chart trend. It'll slow down real fast and it bumps right back up 2 years later just because they overstep themselves. So as long as it's a small incremental decrease over time, it will become sustainable. And if it stays that small decrease over time, that allows us a better opportunity to plan long term for those cuts as we go along because we know they're coming. That's our goals, right? That's our goal, to cut the mill levy. So if we're already planning for it now, that makes it not a question in the future. It's just automatic at that point.
Good, thank you.
One other thing I'd add on is at least I, in my mind, have our eye on, what is it? Land debt goes off in 2034, and that's going to be a big boon, correct?
He's already spent the money.
Correct.
CIP projects.
That's kind of the plan, is to try to slope that boom the best we can and continue to lower this mill, because we do have some, and you'll see when Barry goes through the CIP, there's just big projects in the CIP left. It's tough. Like there's no cool $100,000. I mean, we could probably invent some, but the needs we have are pretty large in the city, and we have to be cognizant of that and ready for it when they hit. And that's what Barry and I are preparing for in the from here till next 10 years.
Yeah, I got a lot of ideas for that. Just want to put it together in a great plan before we present it all to you.
By the way, there is another
so
round
many
of
options.
federal money coming around. I think you may be aware of that. They talked about it at WAMPO today. Yeah. So I think it's due September. Don't quote me on the date. I think applications due September 19th. I think, but we can find out more details.
For WAMPO, you said?
I'm sorry?
For WAMPO, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another round. It's not a WAMPO funding. It's just another round of KDOT funding that's coming out.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. So they had a pretty good year-end boost, about 3.2 million. So they had to scramble and figure out how to spend that before the end of the fiscal year.
Yep.
They have that every year. It just, the state of Kansas ended up with like 120 some million excess dollars that they had to disperse. So anyway, they did. So,
Good news.
Well, we could sure use it for Oliver and 45th.
right.
Get the intersection done.
Yeah. We weren't ready, unfortunately. So, all right, go on.
Awesome. So that covers the police department. So we'll go into the rec department. I know at our last workshop had questions about the day camp, if those revenues are supporting itself now. So I put that together for you here. It is a very sustainable program compared to what's budgeted to what's actually brought in. And I think we increased those fees not too long ago, correct? Yeah, last year. So I mean, you're not going to see a big jump in the revenue. That's obviously going to fluctuate based upon enrollment, the number of kids, but it's starting to stay pretty steady around that $48,000 range. We're still going to budget a little lower than that just to be conservative. That's the way we like to budget. But we fully expect that to be right back up there around the 45,000 or so in revenues. But yeah, it is a sustainable program. For the fiscal year 24 year to date, we're 23,000 over expenses. That was as of mid-July. So near the end of the year, we'll probably be down around that $20,000 mark from revenue over expenses just for day camp.
Have we seen, and maybe the right players aren't here to answer this, but have we seen any change in anything by opening that up to Keachai, the rec department?
I know we're tracking. Let me get some better data for you before I spout
All right.
off, but
That's
I
fine.
know Brian's tracking.
Good. All right. Thank you.
So here's just an overview of the participation numbers since 2020 for the rec overall. With youth sports, adult programs, building rentals, annual passes, drop-ins, et cetera. Gone from 5,600 total in 2020 up to just over 8,000 for our 24 estimated participation for the year. So it's a pretty good jump over the past 4 years. Just a quick history on the rec staffing over there. From what I understand, Brian used to do everything all the time. Very capable guy, very able guy. But over that same time, participation grew. They had to add another rec assistant for programming, things like that. As we can see, the participation was continuing to grow. So we made that program assistant into the assistant rec director, had to hire another full-time employee. Use of part-time employees increased over that same time to really show that while that participation is increasing, we're still having to rely on those part-time workers to their 100% capacity, their 1,000 hours a year. So that's why that true cost of that's shown in the 25 budget, and that salary line is why it is where it's at.
Yeah, and this is kind of and I know in the 2024 budget, it looks like salaries are down, and I was budgeting last year, and I think I baked in, hey, we're probably only use part-timers 500, 300 to 500 hours per year, and it's in reality it's about 1,000. So that's the difference between the estimate and the budget is my probably wishful thinking last year, and reality set in this year. And really what I like about this slide is it is true. Brian probably did everything for 25 years, and then participation kept growing and growing. And what we utilize part-time is for that front desk. So it needs to be manned at all times. So that's a part-time employee. And then the mowing and maintenance, as well as, if you remember, and I don't think this has a big effect on things. I'm just letting you know that, there is a lot more events being rented out at the rec center now that, we open that up to the public, and Brian likes to have a staff member there if they need assistance. So that's really what the part-timers do over there. And I talked to Brian a week ago or so, and if we, not that anybody would want to get rid of any part-timers, but they really do serve a great purpose, because we'd probably have to staff an additional 2 employees if they weren't there. So it's really great that they are able to work part-time for Brian, and Brian has a good relationship with them. So that's kind of the big jump from 24 budget to 25B budget.
Well, that's an area I would think you would utilize part-time a lot. Yeah, because of the hours you have to operate. All right.
So that kind of explains the personnel section there. The only other change from our last workshop, like I mentioned earlier, was that ATV and HVAC. We took that out of the operating budget and moved that over to equipment reserve, just because we had that space available. So that reduced 20,000 from our last workshop for the rec. Senior services, I think the mayor asked about this last time, about the participation numbers for our senior events and everything like that. Sarah does a fantastic job of creating events, maintaining the events, everything like that. So at Central County, we're required to have 7 baseline events, 10 special events, and 35 education activities. In 2013, we doubled the baseline events, almost quintupled the special events, and the educational events, we just exceeded that threshold, and we're on track for that for 24. So not only are we meeting the requirements of the Department of Aging in Sedgwick County, we are far exceeding them.
Maybe they can double up the number that they're giving us every year.
Yeah.
I think,
yeah.
and I'm going to go off the hard part.
think that's gonna happen, but-
35. I think the next level is 35,000, but I believe it has to be a full-time employee. I'm spouting off now, but there's some major threshold we can get, but I think the expense side
It's a huge jump.
makes it almost a wash.
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying do it.
No, we were looking at it a while ago, but we were like, okay, the money doesn't quite make sense. And I think Sarah does a great job, and our seniors are very happy with her, where she's at.
Because Sarah splits her time part-time with the senior and then the other half with the rec.
Correct,
center.
helping
Okay.
out the rec center.
I think that's great how we do that. That's efficiency. I think the more we can have our community use the rec center, and I'm not saying they shouldn't use City Hall, but I know the community room was probably used at a different level before, and now the rec center is being used at a higher level. I've actually witnessed people personally that have utilized it, and I think they really appreciate having that. And I think Ashley and the staff over there has done a good job of being welcoming and accommodating to people needing to use it for rec purposes or community gatherings. So appreciate you guys doing that.
Yep, these are great numbers. So for 23, we averaged around 261 members for the senior center. And so far in 24, we averaged around 205 members altogether. So well done. And then here's the budget for the senior services. That 18,000 for the salary portion, that's what we get in that grant money from Sedgwick County. So that offsets that half-time expense there, or part-time expense there. And the rest is just for the facility operations for the center and doing some of those extra events that Sarah does. So the mayor and council department, the changes that were made here from our last workshop was we did move out those engineering fees to the admin department. And the one last thing we need to talk about here was that chamber donation. We did reach out to the chamber. Ultimately, they said they will abide by whatever decision the council chooses, but they did want to let you know their expenses are always increasing. But if there is any reduction to that $15,000 donation, it may affect what all they can bring to the events, or what kind of attractions they can provide at the events that they sponsor, things like that. I think they say their membership was down about 10 members.
Yeah, and Aaron, the chamber president's going to give his quarterly update on the 20th, so next Tuesday. So if we want to talk about it, then we can. But that they wrote a good email, and yeah, they're working as hard as they can in the email. But I think you can direct it straight to Aaron probably, or if we can talk about it tonight, I can head them off on what type of information you guys are looking for.
I don't have a big feel about it one way or the other. I mean, if we want to reduce it 15, then maybe, or by 5, that's what your proposal here is, right? Reduce it by 5,000.
It would be
20
the
to
same
15?
as last year.
I'm sorry?
The 15,000, which is the same as for 24.
That's what it was. Well, this has a line through on the notes there. That's right. I was confused about that. Okay. Yeah, I don't have a big feel about for it one way or the other because I'm not that close to their budget.
I'd be in favor of continuing to step it down. So whatever it was last year, I think we should step it down because I think we need to show them that it's a 2 or 3 years down the road that they should be planning to not have our funding anymore. That's kind of my personal opinion on it. I know why we're funding it. I know why we did that to get it restarted, but I think we need to start showing them that they've got a plan for us not having full support of it, or not, shouldn't say it that way. Not that we're not supporting them, but financially subsidizing, however you want to use that term. I'd be in favor of stepping it down. So if it was 20 last year, go to 15. If it was 15 last year, go to 10, just to show that that's the plan. Start planning for 5,000 less each year. That's just my opinion.
We've talked about that every time they've come before us, that we were not wanting to totally support them. We wanted them to become self-supporting, and we were just kicking in to keep them going, not to.
It's not a surprise.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a surprise to him, and that should be something that we should hear when he comes to talk to us, is how many more members he's got and how much more his budget's increased, and how much he really needs from us, with the expectation that it's not more than last year.
Well, I mean, we can always leave it where it is right now at the 15 threshold. And then based upon what's reported to you on the feedback, we can always choose to contribute less when that time comes. But this will be essentially our cap, the 15,000.
We're
cap.
covered. Yeah.
That way it keeps our expenditure authority where it needs to be. And then it'll give me a good number to go off of to do the state form tomorrow. So I can have it ready for the agenda for
Yeah.
Tuesday.
You don't have to spend the budget just because it's there. I
Right.
know in the federal
Right.
world, they think you got to spend it because it's there, but we don't have to.
I've already said this about the chamber, and I can appreciate how they've lost 10 members. And I can also appreciate they do a lot with our festivals that rec staff would have to fill in, or the bouncy houses or whatever, the musicians. I'm in favor of a cut of some sort. I don't know if it'll be the full 5,000 or we kicked around 2,500. I want to step down of some kind, but I want to hear from Aaron next week. So
Barry, I did have a question on line item. There was a line item down on merch for TSF or DIST that went up quite a bit.
Yep.
What is
Yeah.
that?
I love it. Thank you to
Uh-oh, I
Councilmember
should-
Hamburger.
Maybe I should have asked.
For pointing that out.
Neckties.
What is it?
What is that?
I had the chamber on the brain, so I typed that 15,000 in
Okay.
right next to the chamber note, even though it's supposed to be in that 25,000.
Gotcha.
So this is the corrected version.
So that's a
that-
typo.
that I printed off for you tonight.
Gotcha.
Yes, it's typo.
Perfect. I assumed something had went awry because it was so much different.
he didn't change his mind on swag. Don't worry.
I was like, wait,
Yeah,
I,
we
thought
had to
we were
get some new
going,
shirts.
I thought we were going the other way with swag.
I was gonna say, since we're saving that 14,000, can we put that to salaries?
Just to give you a little insight to a psyche of our new finance director. He is so, gosh dang it, Ted, I can't believe I did that. And I said, don't worry, nobody's going to notice. And we almost got through. And then Tyler,
I had it circled with a question mark, and I was just like, there's an
It's good,
explanation.
it's good to have some other eyes looking at it for sure.
All right.
It's all good.
So the non-departmental fund, nothing was changed from the last workshop. When we get into our new Tyler system, this will be allocated within the departments that are already in the general fund. So it's not going to change our overall expenditure authority or threshold or anything. It's just going to be allocated to the departments that it needs to be allocated to. But that covers what has historically been budgeted out of the non-departmental fund, which is our transfers, mainly IT stuff, computer support, things like that. So no big changes there. So talk about the pool, put together a overall overview of the pool revenues and expenses throughout the past several years. Not a shocker that the pool doesn't really make money, but it is a great quality of life service that we do provide for our residents. So looking at the 25 budget, it is increasing in expenses there compared to the other years because that $20,000 pool filter that needs to be replaced. That's the main capital outlay item for the pool for fiscal year 25. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward on everything else, salaries.
How often does that
Personnel.
filter need replaced?
from we kept it a lot longer than it's supposed to be. I guarantee you that. What did Brian say?
I think
20
they're 10,
10 years?
20?
I think it's a 10-year pump, and we kept it as long as the pool. I don't know if we've changed it out yet since we.
Pump.
I can get you that information, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty there. I know the conversation was if we replace the motor, but it's just worth it by, it costs the same to buy a new one.
Okay, it's a pump, not a filter.
Filter pump.
Filter pump. It's all one use.
Yeah.
Well, the filter has to be changed out several times a year.
Well, that's,
Not just a filter, but the whole pump assembly itself. Yeah.
While we're on the pool, I was going to point out that the liner plaster turned out great. I don't know what Brian thinks of it or what the staff thinks of it, but I was at the pool several times this summer. It's a really good improvement to the pool itself. I also wanted to commend, I don't know whose idea it was, but I thought it was kind of neat that staff, the rec, tried to have a couple additional events. The one event was kind of like an end of summer event that they just sort of had registration and signups, and I think people enjoyed that. Obviously it's the first year they did it, so the turnout probably wasn't there, but I was just saying it's good to see creative thinking of how they can generate more revenue and utilize the facility more. So appreciate that.
Yeah, the hot dogs pool party is actually assists in us meeting our stormwater requirements. So the money generated from the dogs entering the pool and swimming goes to the city purchasing doggy poop bags that we put around the city for people to pick up their dog's waste. So
They've been
it
doing
has a
that for years
benefit,
now.
yeah.
Yeah. And Heartland's a supporter of that too. So that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, no real changes from our last workshop. Everything's still the same for the pool. HR communications, once again, no changes from the last workshop. Pretty straightforward when it comes to personnel, office supplies, contractual commodities, everything like that.
We're still using laserfish technology.
Yes, very heavily.
Is it?
Yeah, great technology. Land fund. Here's where we transfer all of our debt service and land payments from the general fund. So those are all of our debt service scheduled for 2025. Can't really change those. They are what they are. Just schedules everything out. The special assessment payments, 78,000, that will reduce to 49,000 here in a few years. Or 49,000 will fall off of that here in a few years. So I think I said a couple of budget meetings ago, that'd be a great time to look at. That's another $500,000 we could easily trim off there as well, because it hasn't been being used for we'll have no use at that point. It's just been used for debt.
Well, that's a huge difference from what it was a few years ago. 'Cause I think we were spending like $500,000 on special assessments or more, weren't we?
Yeah, a little more. And that, yeah, and I always like to point out that land debt, not a lot of cities have 1.1 going out the door as soon as they get their revenues. So, we operate, if there's one spot you want to show how well we operate as a city, that's a pretty good chunk of how we stay efficient. It's forced efficiency, sadly, but it's efficient.
Just the land payment, yeah, about 10 mils.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
The remainder of our debt service is about another 7 or 8 mils, and then so we operate about 23 mils operationally. So that's a great point on that. So if you slowly stair-step that down over that same time period, you're building up those cash reserves, start paying cash for projects, reduce that debt overall. So we'll look into that. So the general fund summary as a whole, reduce in fund balance, 335,000. It is a recommended reduction in fund balance. Still keeps us about that 30% mark for reserves. Once again, that overspending is on those one-time projects or items. They're nothing to do with an operational aspect of the city. So that's why it's recommended. So any questions on general fund? Okay. So if there was anything else that we still wanted to cut or would like to cut, this is kind of the list to do it from. This is that list from our last workshop. Those are all the individual kind of items there to pick from for those reductions. So move on to water. For 25, we made a few adjustments here. I mentioned earlier about that CIP transfer. Overall, we're right about a 7% increase in revenues over the 24 budget, right over the $4 million mark. And expenditure-wise, we're just over $4 million there as well. Sewer fund summary, same point. Pretty straightforward, revenues to expenses, pretty balanced now. We transfer those CIP transfers. So on that water fund one, if you see on the 24 budget column, that bottom fund balance number, that 1.8 million, that's if we were to use that whole 525,000 that was allocated for that CIP transfer. In the fiscal year 24 estimate column, that only includes what we've actually used of that 525,000. So moving towards 25, that starting balance will be more like the ending balance for 24 because we didn't use that entire transfer. So really on the 25 columns, we can really plan on those being right around that 2.1 million to start, since we're not going to use all that CIP transfer. And the same thing with the sewer fund. See in 24, that big drop in fund balance, that's because that entire transfer was allocated. If you move over to the estimate column, we've only used about 350,000 of that. So that's why that fund balance is increasing about 1.4, sorry. So those were the only changes there. It was just making it a little more clear to see how that CIP transfer would affect next year's budget. Streets fund still includes the $950,000 transfer from general for the streets program for 25. On the revenue side and expenditure side, nothing changed from our last workshop. Everything's still the same. Same with stormwater, no changes there. We did increase that. If you remember from the last workshop, that was drainage system improvements. We did increase that number just so we have that expenditure authority there. It'll also assist with the drainage work that's going to happen around town. Solid waste, no changes there. Just same as what was presented last time. Land bank, no changes. Land bank is just all those land sale proceeds that we've had holding on to and the increase in interest earnings that we've earned over the years.
We're getting a pretty good return on that now, aren't we?
You're right around 5%.
5%, you said?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About what everybody's paying now for those CDs and that kind of thing. Yeah. Not for money market, but
No, it's not like our,
invested in something similar, I think.
right.
We could get our money any day we want it. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of the trade-off. I do about, what are they, Barry? 6 month CDs, kind of, just in case, it's not locked up long-term at all. It's not technically a CD. We're part of the municipal investment pool of the state of Kansas that dictates it. But that's a lot easier because there's a lot of restrictions on this type of fund.
yeah, that kind of does it for the operating budget for fiscal year 25. So if you have any recommendations or feedback, please let me know. If not, we'll pretty much translate this into that state budget form and bring back the budget and revenue neutral rate hearing notice at next Tuesday's meeting.
Very, I have its own sheet of items that we could look at if we were to want to take another $500,000. The one I had circled was transfer to equipment reserves, $100K. Can you explain what was in that or what our thought is for that? That fully funds our one vehicle police replacement. What is in that?
So next on the list was our equipment reserve replacement plan. So this is fiscal year 24's plan right now. I'll answer a question here in just a second. Which included the 2 police vehicles, the 550 truck, the admin SUV, lawnmower, a grinder pump for Harding Lift Station, and then that sewer cam we purchased recently. So for the 25 budget year, and I have this printout on your desk too, on the back of that budget. Really, that $100,000 from general fund is going to go towards paying for the new police vehicle, $75,000 fully upfitted, and the ATV and the HVAC replacement for rec. So that's $96,000. So that's what eats up that $100,000 transfer. And the other items on here I got with Marty and pulled our entire fleet list and see what was in disrepair, what's going to start needing to be replaced next year. And then we'll build this out even more for 26, 27, 28, 29 until we get our entire fleet listed out and on a whole replacement schedule with everything. Just where we're starting for 25 since it's right now, and then we'll build that plan up as we move along. So then move on to the CIP plan. This is the one from 24, which included all the projects I presented last year, the microservicing, the HVAC here at City Hall, things like that. Those are all about, 50% completed. Microservicing is almost done, but most are still in the works. So for 25, we're going to finish those out, and then we'll have some work to do on bringing back projects for the council to look at, prioritize, and decide from. But we did include 150,000 of that 400,000 transfer from general fund dedicated for that park refresh, as well as the phase 2 for City Hall HVAC replacements.
And this is where, that this is a non-budgeted fund. So this money's not going anywhere. It's for us to set a course, for you to set a course and for us to follow it. And that's kind of what we're looking at, is all these big ticket items. We might pull from different funding sources as we can. I mean, if we wanted to cash flow a certain project, we could look at it. Some of this could be a cash contribution to a bond, all those types of things we can do with this. But really the CIP, long-term planning, I know Councilman Emily's been talking a lot about rec center upgrades, all those types of facility upgrades. And we took a big swing with Public Works here. We're coming up. That's kind of where a lot of this money is to plan out our future, what we want to do with facilities, as well as big major road construction projects.
So this is kind of an overview of what's kind of in there right now as we move along with the CIP. It's always a living, breathing document. We're going to always be adjusting it, looking at it, prioritizing things. If a big chunk of money from WAMPO comes down, that may have a project jump to the top of the list based on priority and funding availability too. So it's more of a placeholder, ongoing, active plan. We can bring it back and review it at any time. So what you have for 25 as of right now, like I said, those can be changed at any point in time. So next steps is next Tuesday, we'll approve the budget summary and hearing notice for the budget and the revenue neutral rate hearing. Then September 3rd, we'll have our revenue neutral rate hearing, pass our resolution exceeding the revenue neutral rate, and then have the 25 budget hearing, and then adopt the 2025 budget on September 3rd. So we got 2 steps left, pretty close. And that's all I had for you this evening.
Okay, I think you've told us this before, but I'm going to go on unless somebody else has a question real quick. How much do you think we generate with a sales tax of 1%?
Is it 500?
I think it's itching closer to 5 to 600. Barry probably find out quicker than me.
500,000?
I bet it's closer to 6. Last time I remember.
So that's almost 5 mils.
590,000 was the estimate from Department of Revenue.
So, God, with that kind of money, I'd like to see us implement a sales tax that expired in 2037 and use it all to reduce our mill levy.
Why? It doesn't reduce taxes.
It's the
Same
same,
people-
it's
same
the
people
same
paying the same
taxes.
taxes?
No, the same people don't pay it.
Who pays it?
People that shop at Treetop that live across the street in Wichita, people that eat at Subway, people,
That's a trade-off.
any new things we
Because other people
have.
going over to Wichita and buying stuff and paying sales taxes there.
It would
we're
also
paying Wichita
be-
sales tax, but-
It would also be every Amazon purchase, I believe. Is that?
Online purchases.
And that's going to be our citizens. But
Yeah. I just it's letting you
Yeah.
that would be the effect, I guess. You're correct in that.
But it will
some
bring in
ways.
some money from outside. And as we grow and add businesses, I hope over the next few years, we would increase what outside people are paying versus our own citizens.
I guess I wouldn't be a fan of that. Like if the goal would be to take in money from outside with a growing city, I would like to see if we did something like that, it'd be tied to specific improvements or something that's tangible that we could be supporting the growth instead of just reducing there is some swap that occurs in there, but right now we'd just be taxing our citizens on all their Amazon packages. There's not gonna be a lot. I don't know what the breakdown would be, Barry, but you could probably find out what the difference between online sales versus retail would be. But
They can probably give me a pretty close estimate, but I wouldn't know exactly that breakdown. But there is a lot to take into consideration when it comes to that 1% sales tax. You can either use it for a general purpose sales tax, which could be anything within the city,
fund.
or you can have a special purpose sales tax with a dedicated,
That would sunset.
1%, 1 cent, whatever, that would have to be used for that type of project. There's a lot of planning that goes into that because you got to have an election. It's got to be approved by the voters. You got to notify Department of Revenue, and it's got to take effect the next tax quarter for collections. That also involves notifying every business in town, every homeowner in town. If you buy a car in Oklahoma, you're going to pay an extra 1% when you go tag your car because the car's housed here in Bel Aire. There's a lot of things you got to think about when it comes to that sales tax limitation. We can definitely research it and look into it and get that timeline and everything. There's just a lot that goes into that.
If you
I
go from-
understand all of that. I'm not totally ignorant.
If you go from the general fund to say we wanted to do a rec expansion and we wanted to pay for it over it, isn't the statute that sunsets? It can't go longer than 10 if it was a specific project, or do you know
You can word it to where it's just forever.
Gotcha.
The general purpose
'Cause
sales tax.
I would be in favor of that if we could come up with the thing that we wanted to talk to our community about and we wanted to get their buy-in on, whether it be rec expansion, whether it be a park initiative, whether it be whatever it is.
Mhm.
But I don't know that I'd be in favor of just flat doing it just to cut the mill, because I think we are just taxing the same people.
Well, last week I did propose rec center and sidewalk improvements, but that's why I said I think we really need to seriously consider this, not just say, oh, it's just going to shift it over here and we don't want to do it. I think we really need to talk through what we can do with it.
Because that is a big expense. I mean, if we're thinking about it, we all saw the same comprehensive plan for the park recommendations. It was millions of dollars. I mean,
Yeah.
It was not a small amount, and we have all these other projects to tackle. I don't know how we can do it all if we didn't consider it at least and let the citizens maybe give some feedback on what project they would support if we did that.
But what I don't want to do is, as I've also heard, is I don't want to increase the taxes on our citizens. I don't mind shifting it in how we collect it, but I don't really want to increase it. I mean, that's why we're doing mill levy decreases every year.
Mayor, did you say you had the meeting with the other mayors in Sedgwick County tomorrow to discuss the sales tax issue?
It's the county level.
I mean, at the county.
Yeah, yeah.
It's tomorrow?
As the mayors at county level, yes. Yes. But that's a county level discussion. It's not a.
County
not a-
tax,
not a
countywide
city.
tax.
I mean, but it
City
also
level.
factors into how much the tax burden would be total
Right.
if they did
Oh,
one
yeah.
and then we jumped on top of
If
it.
they do that, of course, they're under the same rules. They would have to propose something and get it passed by the citizens of the county. So, yeah.
And I'm trying to think who we can, Derby's had a very successful sales tax dedicated to parks for years.
Is it 1%?
I'm trying to find what, if we want someone to present to council at a workshop, what that did for their community, that sort of thing. Is that the first step we want to take, or do we want to jump head first? And as far as feedback goes, what would you like for me to prepare for something like this?
I'm happy with some fact finding, but I don't want to just keep saying no.
Yeah,
I want it to be a very well thought out no if it's going to be no.
Is it something that maybe we can, because I know there's some deadlines, I think something for maybe the 2025 year, maybe we really take a deep dive into it later this year, or is it something you want immediate? That's the time frame.
I assumed it wouldn't take effect until at least the middle of next year anyway. So,
Yeah. try
You
and
know, I
think.
don't know how fast we can get it.
Yeah,
through.
that's
And
where I'm trying to think how fast we can get it.
I don't
going.
want to spend $10,000 on a special election unless we're going to bring in a lot of money, which it sounds like we would.
Mhm.
But it's still an expense that comes out of that
Mhm.
pocket, some pocket. We're
Yeah.
pulling it out of the front pocket or the back pocket.
Let me-
You
Pull
know?
out of pocket.
because the one thing I do know is you really need to have a really strategic plan when you go about this, and I think you're right, and we need to look at it really deep, not just what we've heard about it. And maybe I'll put that on the list, and we'll discuss it here in a future workshop.
Yeah, because we really have to sell this to our citizens.
Every successful one has been a
If we just-
tour,
WV.
a tour of.
A 1% sales
Yeah.
tax, you're going to get a
Yeah,
100% no.
yeah,
But if
yeah.
you come up with a good reason for it.
Yeah, they're going to want to know what they're getting for it, and it has to be really well thought out. And that's why if you have a project in mind, it's easier because people can see it. Oh, that's what I'm going to get. So
Yeah.
I agree with all those comments that you made. That it's probably not going to take effect. It's probably a 2025 ballot initiative if it is one.
I was at Valley Center previously, and we did a sales tax initiative, and that's what paid for the new rec and aquatic facility, the whole pool renovations, and that new splash pad there in Valley Center. So I'm kind of familiar with the whole process there and how that works. Yeah, the defined project is a big piece of that for sure.
The other thing is vetting out what partners we could have a part of that. We might not have to completely cover all the revenue needed to do a project of whatever type if we can come up with potential partner that was interested.
Yeah, if we put a bike path across the city like we've talked about, I'm sure we'd get help with that, but we'd still need money to put towards it. Yeah, those are the kinds of
Match,
projects that we should be looking at. And new park construction,
Quality of life.
that's why I said recs and sidewalks, but
It is funny when we're talking about Skyview Park and 300,000. It sounds like a lot. We kind of just threw out a number at a workshop, and I'm having some preliminary engineering. You need to be able to site plan it and different things. And everybody laughs at me when I say $300,000 park. But so all that stuff is very expensive and would need support, massive support to do something meaningful. That's not a cookie cutter park, or something meaningful that citizens can rally behind. So.
All right. Any other discussion on budgets? All right. The last thing we got on the agenda is the Central
Thank you
Park
very much.
sidewalk discussion. Thank you, Barry. We appreciate all the information and work you put into this.
So this is, pretty straightforward. It's one of those 100,000 reasons why cities shouldn't be a developer. That's still coming at us. Hopefully this might be the last one. I tried to put a little summary together, and I'll try to explain it. So the city was the developer of Central Park, the whole area. The way we do things now for any development is the sidewalks are a special assessment. They all get put in at the same time. Each homeowner pays that special assessment based on the lot and block number, and it's pretty simple. Well, in Central Park, what we did in the past was brought it up to, hey, once you build the house, you put in the sidewalk. And what the original Central Park was, it was more of a $1,500 per lot. Once we get a list together, then we'll go ahead. The city itself will put the sidewalks in, and that worked pretty well up until 2008, 2009, when the housing kind of struck, and then Central Park Third, which is the landing and known as the landing, that area was kind of replatted. And from my research, basically it was, hey, we're half of the lots were controlled. A lot of these lots were controlled by and built by the city when the city was a developer. And when construction homeowners and builders, it's their responsibility to put in the sidewalk. most of them did, some of them didn't, and the builder's long gone, one of those situations. So what we have is, if you drive around, there'll be a few areas where the sidewalk just stops pretty much. And so Keith put together a whole list to complete the whole sidewalk plan for all of Central Park. And that connects to all the trails that go through the park, meaning up in Central Park 3rd, and is about $16,000. I tried to do a lot of research on that fee we collected from 2003 to 2022, and we collected more or less $71,100 from that fee. Based on what I researched, we spent about 54,000, a little under 55,000 for all the sidewalks that you see today. We're leaving about $16,000 inside that fund. Keith put together an estimate about a little over that $16,000 to complete a lot of these broken sidewalks in Central Park 3rd. Kind of the two options: we can use that fund, which has no purpose after we use it, as kind of the developer of Central Park, to connect all the streets for this project, or again, like I said, require the homeowners to pay that fund in a lump sum, or we can look at a payment option for those homeowners. But a lot of the time, and I don't want this to get, the builder promises they would do something and it just doesn't happen. And then the homeowner that might have been there for a while will receive a letter saying, hey, you got to build this sidewalk at the cost of this, So that's really the option I'm looking at right now and presenting to you for your input.
Well, if it's going to cost 16,000 and we have 16,000 in the fund, I think we ought to just pay it and be done with it.
And I'd really like to close out that fund. It's been sitting there for a while, but
Because it is kind of, like you said, it's hit and miss. And
Well-
it should have been enforced a long time ago, but now it's too late.
Where'd the money come from for this
so
fund?
all the
Fees.
fees in Central Park. So it's all within Central Park owners. So what they did is $1,500 per lot, and it ended up being
Who
less.
paid the 1,500?
What's that?
Who paid the 1,500?
Over the years
Each
from
homeowner?
2023 or 2003 to 2022, any of the lots you'll see up on the screen there. So the Central Park,
Each home
each home
paid
is-
1,500 apiece.
correct, and they each got a
And
sidewalk.
then some of the homes did not pay the 1,500 and don't have the sidewalk. Is that what you're saying?
So, and that's where some of these homes did not in Central Park 3rd, and that was after the recession. They, I guess they stopped collecting that fee. They just said, builders, once you construct a house, put in that sidewalk. So
They didn't do it.
They didn't
Okay.
contribute to that.
So they've not, so as a matter of fairness, those homeowners actually ought to be paying that 1,500.
Well,
Just like
and
all the other property owners had to too.
Yeah, and the hard part, or I guess the other area of concern, or not concern, but so all these trails in here were paid for by the city as well. So as far as who paid what, it's the benefit of Central Park. So
They're a
that's
benefit of the city.
Yeah.
To the common city. But
correct.
Sidewalks are paid for by homeowners.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, typically through special assessments, the way to do it now. And this is one of those unique positions where it wasn't done.
But many of those homeowners did pay for their sidewalk.
Oh, many of them out there, yeah.
Not all of them.
Through
the
the
ones
builder.
that don't have them probably didn't pay.
Through the builder. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the builder,
Not
they
a
paid
direct
for it.
fee. It was basically part of their construction of their house.
Okay, but they end up paying for it one way or another. The homeowner paid for their sidewalk.
One way or
And
the
the
other.
ones that don't have the sidewalk, they did not pay for their sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay?
That's not true, because you just said the builder was supposed to put it in. So it was supposed to be included in the price of the lot.
Could be, could not be. I don't know.
Ted,
Yeah.
just clear,
That was the agreement between the city and the builder.
Correct.
Ted, just clear this up. That money that's in that fund, no matter how it got there, whoever paid for it was collected to build sidewalks
To build sidewalks in Central Park.
in Central Park. I'm kind of like, I was a little concerned with this too, because there are a lot of parts of the city that don't have sidewalk. There's lots that doesn't have sidewalk. There's lots that has disconnected sidewalk. And it did seem to me at first glance that this might be unfair because there's other parts of the city of Bel Aire that would also like new sidewalk built. But thinking about it and thinking about how it was collected by the city as a developer of Central Park, it feels like we ought to close this fund, and feels like we need to spend it on sidewalk in Central Park. But that's just mine. I do live in Central Park, so I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. I'm not a part of this portion of Central Park. I'm on the other side near Woodlawn, but this is technically not even in our HOA, so it's not, even if it was an HOA expense. But it does feel weird that we ever had this fund, but I get that we were a developer as a city. But I would also be in favor of how do we use it to build sidewalks in general. I know we have the $15,000 budget line item for sidewalks. That's to benefit all of the city of Bel Aire. So is there a way we can make sure that that 15,000 isn't spent in Central Park, make sure it's spent elsewhere?
The hard part on that is we've done a lot in Central Park as a city. So meaning like a lot of the amenities and different things. So I think we're justified in sweeping the 16,000 into the general fund. There's a lot of areas we can address it, and then we can address it with what we want. It's just, again, this is not an easy choice. That's why I brought it before you. If it was easy, I would just do it.
Did the residents come to you about this, or just part of our general plan of connecting those sidewalks?
So Keith sent a letter already to the residents, say they would have to pay for it. And this is just one of those situations where we could offer this fund sitting there. So I wanted to bring it before the council.
So would we petition them with specials to do that?
No, it would be, hey, you're the homeowner. You need to build out this sidewalk.
Gotcha.
You're willing to set up a payment plan with the city, those types of agreements.
How did we accumulate more money for those sidewalks than was expended?
And again, I'm doing a lot of research, financial research, and that's just what was clearly labeled inside the fund. So
you could
okay, that's what I'm saying. It's not an exact science when you go back.
I know you're trying to go back 20 years, and
We-
it's hard to go back 20 years. I get
We
that.
guessed it would cost $1,500 and it ended up costing $1,350, and we
That-
kept
right.
the balance.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
That's
I get
the
it.
best.
Okay.
I can-
Don't worry about it.
I do just in general want to make a statement. I really think it's best that our city has a policy going forward. I don't know that, I know we try to do this in all our developer agreements, that we have sidewalk in every new development. And I know that there's been a few new developments that were built without it. I think I've expressed that frustration in the past. That will clean stuff up like this. If it's just a part of the special assessment process.
The special assessment process is so smooth when doing this.
That will
'cause
clean
But
this up.
you're saying we have areas that don't have sidewalks?
There was that, in fact, it was our last meeting. I think it was it Chapel Landing or one of those neighborhoods over off 53rd, really narrow streets and no sidewalk. That was the one we discussed where we were going to pay to expand that second entrance.
Oh, I remember the second entrance.
And so, I
thing,
mean,
but-
That's because
having that policy and enforcing that with a developer agreement is going to fix things like this. I know this is just kind of weird and awkward because we were the
I didn't know we
developers when it
approved
was-
any plating that didn't have sidewalks. That
I think our
surprised
problem
me.
is our policy doesn't require sidewalks on cul-de-sacs, so they build a lot of
Oh,
cul-de-sacs.
okay, that's what it is. They defined it all as cul-de-sacs. I get it.
I mean, the
All right.
biggest thing there is just being consistent. I don't know that we have a policy. It's making sure our developer agreements are pretty consistent, but that I would be more in favor of taking those funds and increasing our sidewalk fund that we funded 15,000 for this next year in this budget, I believe, and using it across the city rather than just doing it here, unless the citizens are interested in doing it and paying for it, because everybody else is. I mean, if you do special assessment on all our new developments, every lot is going to pay for that.
That sidewalk fund is only for repairs, though. That is not intended for any new sidewalk installation, right?
So the sidewalk program that is in that we're talking about is based on the sidewalk program policy, which is repairs.
For code enforcement stuff.
Code enforcement. We got to talk about that too soon.
We'll stay out of that one tonight.
We got a lot of workshops going on.
I mean, one way of looking at it too is sort of like what we did with Aurora Park, where we sort of encouraged the citizens to do paving by saying, hey, we'll match you. If we wanted to, we could use this as seed money to do a petition match where we say up to this much percentage or up to this dollar amount. If you petition, we'll chip in to
Yeah.
help build the sidewalk initially, but you don't want to make that number too big. I mean,
I think we're just complicating it. This is a special situation and we should just use the money and do it. I still think that.
Yeah, I would definitely support using the money within the Central Park, 'cause that's where it was tagged, because the people in Central Park will use those sidewalks to get out of there, wherever their home is. Maybe it goes through some of these areas. I just think if it was tagged there, use it there and be done with it. But I do agree, we need a better sidewalk program, get people off the streets, because we have too many people walking on the street and not enough sidewalks in the places they need to be. So it would be great if we had a plan to at least tie in the neighborhoods to maybe the new bike trail, just to have connections and have, instead of having so many disjointed combinations of sidewalks. That would really be helpful for the community, in my opinion.
Greg's been quiet tonight. Is he there? Or just name only?
I will tell you, I almost hit somebody walking in the street the other night.
I'm awake.
And they were walking on a street with their sidewalk right beside it.
Oh,
So
my.
you're not going to stop people from being idiots.
Well, but where we can help the ones that aren't.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We can help 90% of the people.
Mayor, I like the simple approach of just spinning it down. The numbers seem to match nicely.
Yeah. I kind of get that. I just didn't want citizens to say, hey, wait a second, what'd you do to me? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, and in government, there's a lot of special interests or special purpose funds that get set up and just linger for a long time. So I mean, that would be my preference, is just let's close it out. We're done being developers in any regard. And that's kind of like I said when I started, this might be the last developer type decision this body makes, which I'm glad to be part of.
So this needs to be an item on the next meeting, or is this just
That's
something you can do?
I'll probably put in an item just because it's over 10,000, and it's broken up into many little projects, but we can just, it's easier if it's just on an agenda item.
Just get it done. It's fine.
Thank you.
I'm a little concerned about the fairness of it, but it's not like you're talking $100,000. You're talking about 16,000. So it's not like it's a big deal. So, all right. Any other conversation, discussion about that issue? I misplaced my agenda.
I think that's the last item.
I think it was too. Okay. That's the last item. I guess we're adjourned. Unless somebody got something else they want to talk about. There it is. It says dismiss here. I found it.
sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your input and spending time talking about all these fun topics. And we will see everybody next Tuesday. So have
Hey,
a
thank
good
you.
evening.